Hi, I'm Janice Switlo, and I've had a few people ask me, could I explain a little more or provide a little more background to this concept that I always use of Indigenous nationals and how that relates to Canada, the fabric of Canada, as one person's put it. So that's the point of today's talk. First of all, let me start with what an Indigenous national is not. Okay, it is not, the person is not a First Nation. A person is not a domestic ethnic minority, is not a band member of an Indian Act band. And when you think of someone asks you, what's your nationality? So someone might say they're Italian, for instance. This goes beyond culture. This goes beyond what you speak, what you like to wear, what you like to eat, what religion you practice, goes beyond that. What it means is that in all Indigenous nations, there's a term. In the languages, because the nations are defined by linguistic boundaries, not by communities within those boundaries. So you think language, original language. Now, yes, a lot of people speak English, a lot of people speak French. That's not the point. You are able to ascertain, and certainly I have books with maps and all sorts of things that show the expanse of a variety of nations based on the linguistic, the language, the core language spoken. As I said, in most of these languages, there's a term that says the people. If you translate that, it means the people. So when I'm using Indigenous national, it's important to understand that Indigenous nationals are actually foreign nationals to Canada, except that Canada has deemed Indigenous foreign nationals as Canadian citizens. And I've had a separate episode discussing that. So in a nutshell, Indigenous nationals of your original nation, which is a linguistically defined nation, which has relations with other nations. There's been a lot of intermarriage, a sharing of different nations. The boundary of that is huge. That's why I've talked about Treaty 1 to 11, because that's an example of the extent of the linguistic base of the nation. So I'm using Indigenous nationals to identify those who know who they are as a member of their original nation, the same nation their ancestors were members of, were nationals of, and using that to distinguish between Canadian citizenship, between Indigenous Canadians, Aboriginal Canadians as it used to be called, and members of Indian bands, for example. So it's very important to start by using terminology that applies. You have a nation-to-nation relationship with the Queen. You are nationals of that nation that has a relationship with another nation, that being the Queen. So how do you refer to yourselves? Ideally, using your own terminology. But when you're trying to convey and communicate with people not of your nation that don't speak your language, then the best that I can recommend is to speak of Indigenous nationals. Instead of me going through the 40, 50 different nations that can even be condensed even further based on current relations. I choose that term, and I hope that helps further understanding what I'm talking about. Thank you.